Welcome into another edition of the Hang Time Podcast. Sekou Smith here in Atlanta. My main man, John Schumann, is in New Jersey. John Hartzell behind the glass, as always, our super producer. Another wild, crazy, spin your head around weekend and a busy week in the whole in the NBA. The Week 4 power rankings are live now on NBA.com. We'll get into those a little bit more in a moment. Shu, what's your big takeaway from this past weekend? What did you see that really stood out to you?
That's a good question. I just think as we go on, every week just provides us more information. Every week we learn not only just more about every team, but we also learn about the teams that they've played. So, you might have thought in week 1 that beating the Rockets was a good win, or beating, somebody else was a good win. And then, as we go on, you learn that wasn't exactly as much of a quality win as we thought it was. And so I think we're getting more information about, more teams as the week go on, and we see the teams that are consistent, the teams that are inconsistent, consistently good, consistently bad, and then inconsistent. And then also, like I said, we get an idea of like sort of quality wins. So I've been able now to just see, okay, there's 12 teams that are currently over 500. How have those teams done when they've played each other? Who's had to play the most games against those teams? And that gives you a little bit of context for everybody. And then, how have teams done in those games against each other? The good teams have done in those games against each other. The Warriors are dominant right now. I mean, they're just, their offense has been ridiculous. They've won 7 straight. And how efficiently they've scored over those 7 games, they've scored like 125 points per 100 possessions over those 7 games.
But I sense some reticence in your voice. Like,
no.
Is there a butt coming?
There's 2 parts to this. One, it's the most efficient 7-game stretch that they've had in their 4+ seasons under Steve Kerr. So that's just ridiculous. This has been an incredible offensive team for the last 4+ years now, and they are now under their most efficient stretch of that 4 years. The other thing is that we realize that their schedule has been a little bit soft, and they don't have a single win over any of the other 11 teams that are currently over 500. New Orleans might have been over 500 when they beat them, but their only game within that group, 12 teams that are currently over 500, was their loss in Denver, which makes this week good because they host the Grizzlies on Monday. The Grizzlies are 5-3, playing excellent defense, and then they host the Bucks on Thursday. And so it's a chance not only for them to pick up some quality wins, but also for us to sort of see just how much they have their foot on the gas pedal.
Mm-hmm. I was watching games all weekend, Shu, and I'm intrigued by the dynamics of how these teams bounce back from night to night. And the Lakers struck me, getting a big win on the road in Portland, snapping that streak. I think it was 16 straight losses in Portland.
And that was their best defensive game, statistically their best defensive game of the season.
Right. And then they come back and get walloped by Toronto.
41-10. It was 41-10.
Without Kawhi. I mean, it's staggering to me the way some teams ride that kind of emotional roller coaster early in the season. And I know there are other teams like that we'll talk about here shortly. But the Lakers in particular stuck out to me because, and I know we're going to get whacked for this, but is LeBron measuring himself, or do you think we've finally seen a little bit of Father Time tapping on his door and LeBron not being as easily able to affect games as he once was? Because I was watching him specifically against the Raptors, and I don't know, it's a home game. The stars are out. You figure this is his time when he shows up and shows out. And he looked like he couldn't get his body to do. And I don't want to start something where we're skewing LeBron for every little moment, because he's had these defensive issues before. He had them in Cleveland last year that were very well highlighted. But it just seems like he doesn't contest and attack on the defensive end like he did years ago. And I know that's a part of getting older in this league, but it's more glaring to me now on this Lakers team for some reason than it's been while he's in Cleveland. And certainly I didn't think that was the case in Miami. I thought he was at his defensive best when he was playing on that Heat team. But have you watched him and noticed any signs of that kind of slippage in his game defensively?
Oh yeah, there was an early season game against Portland where I think I even tweeted out the video of it where he just was basically asleep on the weak side, and CJ McCollum sort of drifted from the right wing to the right corner for a wide open three that was a dagger, and the Blazers win. I think put them up 6 or 7 or something in the last minute or last 2 minutes or something. We've talked about it plenty on this thing. Yes, that's where his age has shown up. And you look at his offensive numbers and you say, wow, this guy is doing what he's doing in year 15, year 16, whatever it is, year 13, year 14, the past couple of years. It's amazing. But at the same time, yes, if you watch his defense, it's been bad the last couple of years. The Cavs, the year they won the championship, I think they ranked 10th. Then 2 seasons ago, they slipped to the bottom 10. And then last year, we know they were 29th on defense. And he was a part of that. And right now, the Lakers are 23rd. Last year, they were the most improved defensive team, or one of the second most improved defensive team. They went from 30th to, I think, 16th or so defensively last season, and now they've fallen back again. They have played 5 of their 10 games against teams that rank in the top 10 offensively right now, and only 2 against teams that rank in the bottom 10. So that's a little context as far as their defense right now. But yeah, your point is perfectly right. I've told this story before where I was covering the Olympics in 2016 in Brazil, and the U.S., their last 3 pool play games, they went undefeated. We know that. But their last 3 pool play games, their defense was terrible. Like they were winning like 130 to 120 against 3 pretty good teams. And I remember talking to a sort of a USA staff guy sort of between those pool play games and the elimination rounds. And he said, this is where we really miss LeBron. And I was like, you mean like on defense more than offense? He's like, absolutely. Because he has the instincts and athleticism and quickness to erase mistakes on that end of the floor. He just sees stuff before it happens, and he has the ability to erase mistakes defensively just because he's 1, huge, 2, incredibly fast, and 3, like incredibly smart. And I wrote at the end of last season, LeBron was asked about Draymond Green during the finals, and he went on to laud, Draymond's defense. And my first thought was like LeBron could be as good as Draymond Green on defense. Like if he had that focus and that energy. I mean, he's bigger than Draymond. He's faster than Draymond. He's just as smart as Draymond, maybe smarter. He could be the best defensive player in the year if that's where defensive player in the league, if that's where he put his effort. But, I think we're well past that at this point.
Shoot, the one team and, the one person to me whose impact has been maybe the most significant of anything I've seen. And I know we assumed LeBron would have a huge impact on the Lakers, which hasn't really been cashed in yet to me. They're still playing uneven basketball. It's Mike Budenholzer in the Bucks. And it's not just Giannis playing crazy good. It's that entire team playing really well. I can't get over how simple Bud's tweaks are when he gets a team that's got the right parts, and how quickly he can kind of convince them to play in the way that he wants them to. But it's so effective. I mean, Giannis was just unreal. Yesterday I felt bad for the Kings. It was like any good vibes they'd had to start this season, Giannis dunked them away. I mean, he literally was abusing people. And he's not even fully immersed yet in what Bud is going to want him to do in that offense. And he was great on both ends. As far as a best game or a best performance of somebody over the weekend, Giannis's is the one that really shook me up, thinking I thought he maybe 2 more years he would be what I think he is right now, which is arguably and maybe the best player in the East right now.
I mean, I can't argue with that. It's amazing. Like he's still not shooting from outside the paint or making shots from outside the paint, at least. But, just putting 4 shooters around him makes such a difference. And, last week we hyped up that Raptors-Bucks game, and then they said Kawhi Leonard was going to rest, and then Antetokounmpo was out with a concussion. And so my default was, all right, Kyle Lowry's the best player out of this group. But the Bucks, the Bucks have Chris Middleton. But the thing is, they didn't need a big game from Chris Middleton to win that game. It was just such a balanced game. Von Maker sort of came off the shelf and played decent. And I thought even, in their destruction of the Kings, Antetokounmpo had a triple-double, but it was still, the scoring was pretty balanced. I mean, they're just getting contributions from everywhere. And what's amazing is, we think they've had the biggest increase in the percentage of their shots that have come from 3-point range, right? And that's the offense it's that the big offensive tweak. But they've outscored they're at the same time, they've outscored their opponents in the paint every single one of their games so far, in part because their defense has been so much improved in protecting the paint. Thursday's game against the Warriors will be a good test of that defense, where they're dropping their bigs, into the paint and protecting the rim as number one priority. And obviously the Warriors are the team that can take advantage of that scheme the most, with Steph Curry coming off pick and roll, and then, their movement, where if, say, Brook Lopez is sagging off of Draymond Green or something like that, or Damian Jones, whoever it is, that guy can go set a screen for one of the guards, and now Lopez isn't there to help, So Thursday's game against the Warriors will be a terrific test. And this whole trip is going to be a great test.
They're at Portland, at the Warriors, at the Clippers, and finish it up at Denver.
Four really good teams, yeah.
29-9. It's going to be crazy to see how they deal with that and see how they respond, because this will probably be more adversity than they've dealt with so far. But I don't know. I think they might be equipped to handle it.
Yeah, but also in that note about teams that have played, as mentioned earlier, teams that have played good teams. The Bucks are already 4-1 against the other 11 teams that have winning records. So they have. It's not like they haven't been tested already. It's just this one will be this trip will be even more interesting.
Yeah, the Thunder. Shu, another team that, I mentioned earlier about these teams that have been riding that emotional roller coaster. They started off the season without Russell Westbrook available. They're now 4-0 after an 0-4 start to the season. They climbed 11 spots from 22 to 11 in the NBA.com Power Rankings, which has the Warriors, Bucks, Nuggets, Raptors, and Pacers as the top 5 this week. Is it as simple as getting Russ back and getting him in a rhythm, or is there something else going on with the Thunder?
I mean, I think we've talked about this. For this team, it's always about the other guys and their ability to just pitch in and add to what Westbrook and George and Adams bring. That 0-4 start was brutal offensively, and they've sort of found their offense a little bit over these last 4 games. And I think Dennis Schroeder has been pretty good coming off the bench. Obviously, that's probably a more comfortable or a better role for him. I think the Schroeder plus Westbrook minutes remain a question mark, and I think that's going to be a key going forward. But, if he's been pretty consistent, I would say, in the 10 to 15 point range and not shooting too poorly. And that's key. And so they're the team that, sort of quickly found its footing, although 2 of those wins are against the Suns and the Wizards. And, but, a road win at Charlotte is good. And I think there's still some questions with this team, but 4-4 is a lot better than the alternative.
Yeah. You mentioned the Wizards. You talk about a team that, and they were cooking for Dwight's first few minutes. I was watching it and thinking, oh man, we're wrong. We were, Dwight is going to make a difference.
Dwight for MVP.
Yeah. But it was like the minute that first burst was over, the game was over. And we're going to have to do an autopsy on the Wizards here sometime soon, Shu, because it's just not what anybody expected from them. Not with the money they spent on that roster. I read Jerry Brewer of the Washington Post had a really interesting column last week where he talked about them needing to blow it up, and that basically this thing has run its course with the current group of guys they have together.
Easier said than done.
Yeah. I know. And you're looking at it and saying, well, John Wall, Bradley Beal, Otto Porter, these guys are in the age-wise, they're all in the sweet spot that you would want for your franchise players, for your core group. But it's just not working.
They need some sort of come to Jesus moment where they have to figure out, like, okay, will this ever work? Or
yeah,
because you're right. They are in their primes. Like they should be
as competitive as they're going to be.
From an age-wise and talent-wise, there should be no reason to break up these guys, right? But when it comes to chemistry and defense and playing hard and playing consistently, playing together, there's issues. And so it stinks. You shouldn't have to – you want – like the same thing we've said with Minnesota. It stinks. Like these guys should be great. They should be really good.
Yeah.
And like I said, easier said than done as far as breaking it up, because Beal is the best out of the group, but he's the most tradable out of the group. Porter's Wall's contract is burdensome.
It's going to be untenable, yeah.
And Porter is obviously not playing up to his deal. And so, Porter's a player that I'm sure a lot of teams would like, but the contract that comes with it is tough to deal with. And like I said, Wall's contract is huge. Beal is the only one that should have a ton of appeal, but that means the Wizards giving up the best of the 3, So yeah, it's disappointing. You want to see 3 really good players make it work, and that hasn't been the case so far.
The team of the week, Shu, the Denver Nuggets. Nice win over the Jazz on Saturday. They're 8-1. Jokic is looking fantastic. Huge game on League Pass tonight. They got the Celtics in town. A Celtics team that to me looks like they're also starting to turn a corner early here and get more comfortable. But Denver's defensive improvement, how does a team go from where they were defensively to where they are now without some infusion of defensive-minded talent? Like, how did this – how do you do that organically in this league, just to get that much better team defensively?
They've changed their scheme. They've kind of sort of done the opposite, I think, of the Bucks, where they're playing a little bit more aggressive on the perimeter with their bigs, and that has helped them force more turnovers. It's helped them defend the perimeter. But I think more than anything, it's just effort and focus within that scheme. I think they realized how close they were to making the playoffs last year, probably realized that the difference was a handful of possessions on that end of the floor, and realized that consistent defensive effort will help them get where they want to go. And so, with they're 8-1 last week, they beat the Pelicans without Anthony Davis. They needed a Paul Millsap tip-in to beat the Bulls in overtime.
Yeah.
They beat the Cavs.
It's not a runaway 8-1.
Yeah, and the Jazz were playing the second game of a back-to-back. So there's, that's a little bit of context with it. But, you can only play the games in front of you, and they've taken care of business about as well as you can. And they are 3-0 against the other teams that are over 500 with the Warriors' only loss, obviously. They beat the Clippers on opening night. And so tonight should be fun. Celtics game should be great. The Celtics defense has been fantastic. Offense, I still have questions. I did a little video about this last week where their offense has struggled. Their offense with their starting lineup, which is super talented, has struggled. And if you look at the numbers, it's because they're not getting into the paint and they're not getting to the free throw line. And watching that lineup together, it's super skilled, but it's perimeter oriented with Al Horford at the 5. They're basically playing 5 guys out. That should allow them, everybody driving lanes, like lanes to attack. But I think they just too often settle for jumpers. And as terrific as Jason Tatum is, and as talented as he is, I think he's sort of a prime one of the bigger culprits in that regard. I think he's a little too mid-range happy. Maybe that's, spending too much time with Kobe over the summer, and that he's a little mid-range happy with his jumper. And so I've kind of soured on the Boston offense a little bit. I think they're definitely, Gordon Hayward's just getting his legs back. They're going to shoot better as the season goes on, and they remain really talented. But I just think like that group, and like I said, the fact that they don't get into the paint very much, they don't get to the line very much, that could sort of prevent them from being as good offensively as the talent would have you assume. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like it's they've got to be a little, maybe Kyrie Irving starts attacking more a little bit. Maybe Tatum starts attacking more, but I still feel like if you watch them, you just see a lot of possessions where they just settle, where the ball doesn't even touch the paint, and they just sort of settle.
Just take 3.
Yeah, settle for jump.
They do. I thought that watching them last week, my only gripe about them was that they took too many quick threes. I thought they were taking shots way too quickly when they could have done more to kind of work the ball around for a better shot, for better opportunities for some of those guys. But one of the things Brad Stevens does show is he allows those guys the freedom to play a certain way, which in turn helps them develop, sharper skills throughout the course of the season. I know it's a hard watch, and you watch a game, everybody is shooting it and putting the ball. It's ridiculous. Some of these, you look up at the end of the third quarters and teams are already 99, 100 points. And I'm going, how does this slow down? Like when, surely the defense are going to have to respond and teams are going to start trying to take away something. But a rough week as well, Shu, for a couple of teams who turned out the power in New Orleans and Detroit. They were rocking. And I'm thinking of all these narratives we could have about both teams, about AD, and an MVP candidate, and Blake Griffin, his resurgence, and how he seemed to have new life, this time around in Detroit. And then, bam, both of them, just nothing, after these undefeated starts. The Pelicans are 4-5 and Detroit is 4-4. Just like that. Is there something that other teams figured out about them? And I know anytime Andre Drummond sees Joel Embiid, we're going to have issues. But, the 11 spots dropped for the Pelicans, 8 for the Pistons in your power rankings. What was the determining factor for both those teams you think struggling the way they have?
Well, I mean, let's just look back at Detroit's 4-0 start. I mean, they beat Brooklyn by 3 at home. They won in Chicago by 2. They beat Philly at home by 1 in overtime. And then they beat Cleveland at home by 7. So there was some let's wait a minute idea, after their 4-0 start with like, okay, they haven't exactly been beating teams very easily. And that was with Blake Griffin off to a ridiculous start shooting the ball. And so, the schedule has got a little tougher. They played 2 games against the Celtics and then their other 2 games on the road, losing to Brooklyn, losing at Philly. Their offense has been terrible. It just has. Griffin has cooled off, obviously, since that hot start. Reggie Jackson has been ice cold, and they're not getting much help from anywhere else. Reggie Bullock was one of the best shooters in the league last year, and he's definitely not one of the best shooters in the league this year. Kennard is hurt. They haven't had – I think – I've said this before. I think they were going to miss Anthony Tolliver. They have a couple of sort of floor spacing bigs, John Lure and Ellenson, but Ellenson just seemingly hasn't worked out. In fact, they declined his option for next year. And Lure, I think, is sort of still getting back from an injury that he suffered, I think, late in the summer. And so offensively, they're struggling. Griffin can only do so much. I was at that game in Brooklyn, that overtime game in Brooklyn on Wednesday. He hit some huge shots for them in that game, but it just, it wasn't enough. And they got Spencer Dinwiddie down the stretch. And then with New Orleans, obviously Anthony Davis being out for 3 games has hurt them. He was out for 3 of their 5 games, 3 of the 5 games on this losing streak. And then one of the other games was against the Warriors. Their defense has really fallen off over this losing streak. And so their concern for them is on the other end of the floor. But obviously, having a healthy Anthony Davis is the most important thing for them. And I'm not sure, what he has an elbow injury. I'm not sure if that's going to be an issue going forward. It's not serious enough that he's been out the whole time, but, it's obviously had an effect.
Yeah, the cynics would tell you that this is more of the same issue that's plagued him basically his entire career is availability. I know Alvin Gentry said the other night, if this was the playoffs, he could play.
Yeah.
But people who are skeptical of his toughness, and I'm not saying it's fair, I'm just saying that's what's out there.
And the thing is, when he sits, you have a front line of Nikola Mirotic and Julius Randle, which is pretty brutal defensively. I was watching, I forget which game of theirs, but I was watching Randle on one possession. Remember that video of Andre Bargnani getting turned around 3 times on one defensive possession, just getting completely lost? Julius Randle did a pretty good imitation of that on one possession the other night. So obviously, it's not only Davis just being a monster defensively, but it's the huge drop off that they suffer when those other 2 bigs are on the floor without him.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know if it's fair early in the year. I mean, Kawhi Leonard has rested a couple times. A lot of guys are, and I won't even bring up Jimmy Butler, who I'm not interested in discussing that drama today at all. But different guys have been resting.
Yeah, and I don't like that. And Leonard actually had an injury. A foot injury, and I don't like foot injury. The other one that concerned me was Jaylen Brown, missed a game with a foot injury, but then he got an orthotic or something that helped him deal with the pain. And but my thought is, okay, but why is he, is this something that he's going to be dealing with for the rest of the year, and Kawhi, having a foot injury, it's always a little scary. We don't know the severity of it. I don't really think at this point.
I don't know if it matters after watching the Raptors without him. I mean, they look so good, Shu.
Serge Ibaka is. I mean, we talked about it with Eric last week, but Serge Ibaka has been fantastic as
Kyle Lowry's been great
as a full-time center. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know. I like the energy they're playing with. To me, I always say a team that's serious about trying to win a championship kind of plants a flag in training camp and tries to ride that thing from the start to finish. I like what Toronto's doing. I like what they're doing in that regard in terms of they got a championship mentality. They want to win big, and they're out every night to prove that they're the team they think they are.
At the same time, they have the ability to rest their best player.
Yeah. So I mean, they got it all cooking right now. And good for them.
Van Vliet coming back obviously is huge for them too.
Right. I mean, to me, it's just the subtle component have to be right for you to win big. It can't just be a pipe dream in terms of, we want to win big. We'll see what happens. No, we want to win big, and this is how we're going to go about doing it. And I think the Raptors are on the right path. A team that maybe can't find the path right now. The Los Angeles Lakers. Tyson Chandler gets a buyout with Phoenix. And he's reportedly going to sign with the Lakers after he clears waiver shoe. Is a 36-year-old Tyson Chandler the remedy for what ails the Los Angeles Lakers?
I don't know. I mean, it's been a while since Tyson Chandler's been on a relevant team. So,
yeah.
And even last year, I mean, he was, at some point they just shelved him. The Suns just sort of shelved him, behind Alex Len and whoever their other bigs were. I forget.
It was forgettable.
Yeah, it's and so I really don't know. Early on in the season, the Lakers were much better defensively with JaVale McGee on the floor than they were playing like Kuzma or LeBron at center. That differential has been reduced greatly in the last few games. But I think just having another option there is important. I mean, they were obviously desperate enough to play Zubac some regular minutes the last couple of games. Yeah. But I just don't know if Chandler is going to be much better than either of those other two guys, and also if playing more minutes with a real center on the floor is going to hurt them offensively. Offensively, they're going to be at their best with LeBron and four shooters. And, McGee gives them that role, that rim running center that can draw the defense in a little bit. But Chandler maybe has lost a little bit as far in the athleticism department, where you can't just lob the ball up to him and have him go get it and throw it down, I think. And so offensively, it could be a big question if they can continue to score efficiently enough with him on the floor.
I don't know whose playbook this move is from either. I mean, LeBron usually wants veteran shooters, guys who are seasoned shooters around him. Maybe this is more of from the Luke Walton playbook.
I mean, look, their centers.
In terms of Chandler,
yeah. I mean, their centers were JaVale McGee, Zubac, and your guy Wagner.
Well, Mo Wagner's not. Yeah, he hadn't been available,
and I don't even know if he's a real center. So I mean, they needed something, and so I guess they prefer Tyson Chandler to Joakim Noah, who is still out there. I need somebody to free Robin Lopez out of Chicago. He's not even playing. Like, he doesn't even play, which is weird to me. He's somehow playing behind Cristiano Felicio in Chicago, and I think he's a serviceable center. So he's on my mind when I think of the Lakers needing, a center. So obviously they were so thin at that position that they needed to get something.
Yeah. I don't know that I can ever imagine Joakim Noah playing on the same team as LeBron, given their Hollywood as hell history.
Good call.
But I would pay money for that if Noah was to join LeBron James on any team, just to see if they could melt some ice in that relationship.
Hey, I mean, Rondo's out there. I mean, like,
I was going to say, anything's possible.
Yeah.
As Kevin Garnett said once famously. The Warriors are your team to watch this week, Shu. We mentioned earlier about the matchups they'll have with the Bucks, obviously, on TNT Thursday night. They host the surprising, at least to me, Memphis Grizzlies tonight. Any other teams out there that you got to keep an eye on this week, just in terms of what their schedule presents, whatever the circumstance might be?
We mentioned the Bucks already and their road trip. That Denver-Boston game should be fun. I mentioned in the intro to Power Rankings, Charlotte and Detroit are sort of fascinating to me. I thought they would be the two teams competing for the playoff spot that LeBron vacated in the East, and maybe the Wizards are vacating another spot. But Detroit, like we talked about, has had sort of an up and down, and so we still don't know what they are. Charlotte is now 5-5 with a point differential of a team that's 8-2 because they've had 3 huge wins, and they're 1-4 in close games, basically. And so they play for the first time on Sunday, in Detroit. And I think that's just sort of a game to watch if you're interested in who's gonna take up these last few playoff spots in the East conversation. And maybe that's just me, but that's a game that I'll have my eyes on next Sunday.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, and I know we watch them and we talk about them all the time. I really am curious to see what the Lakers do coming out of all the drama. We didn't even mention the Magic Johnson, Luke Walton.
Less than 10 games, right?
Yeah, I mean,
we got questions about Luke Walton's job status, job security in less than 10 games.
Yeah, I mean, we should have known it was coming. It kind of caught me by surprise foolishly. I don't know how I did because I should have expected it, should put it on the calendar, that by this time there would be some rumblings and some drama swirling around that situation. Maybe we'll dive into that a little further. Our man Sean Powell from NBA.com has been all over the Lakers this season. We need to get him on here and kind of have him break down what he sees and what the mood is around that team and that organization as they try and straighten things out. Be sure to check out the full NBA.com Power Rankings every Monday, authored by my man John Schumann at NBA.com/Power Rankings. We'll be back Thursday, Shu, and I don't even know if we kind of made up our minds about who we want to dissect on our Thursday show, but we'll be sure to dig deep on a team and get some insights from somebody who's around that team every day for you on Thursday's edition of the Hang Time Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to Hang Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes every Monday and Thursday all season long. Please leave a review. Tell everybody how much you love Mr. Convenience and Cookies, John Schumann, doing his thing every week on the show. And I got a little TV duty this week, Shu, on Wednesday night. I'm very interested in digging in with our man Dennis Scott. We had some interesting conversations last week during the breaks. I might cheat and let everybody in on some of those conversations we had about specific players. One guy we keep mentioning that nobody's talking about, and I'm sure you've noticed it, is D'Angelo Russell being on the bench in fourth quarters for the Nets. I made the comment to 3D and Matt Weiner that, isn't this kind of a crossroads year for him in terms of what you believe he might be going forward in his career? And for him to not be on the court in fourth quarter says something about what Kenny Atkinson and the Nets think about D'Angelo Russell. I mean, that's something that I want to...
I'll say one thing. The question for me going into this season that I started last season is if he or Spencer Dinwiddie was more likely to be on the Nets roster next year. Dinwiddie is obviously at the end of a cheap contract and will command some more money. But I will say this about Russell not being on the floor in the fourth. They have two other really good playmaking guards in Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert, who's obviously having a fantastic season. And then they have Joe Harris as a shooter that needs to be on the floor when they're trying to get buckets down the stretch. So I will say that too. That I don't think it's all about Russell being bad, although he's had some bad moments. He's also had some good moments.
Yes.
I just think that those other two guys, especially in late game isolation situations, and we've talked about this before, those guys are better at getting around guys in isolation. Russell can be really good in pick and roll when he gets a screen and gets a little space, but he just doesn't have the burst to get around guys in isolation.
Right. And those guys are bigger than him. Both of them are bigger than he is as well.
Yeah. And so
it makes a difference.
Yeah. It's about the options, I think, that they have down the stretch.
Yeah, it's just something that, like I said, we sit around sometimes talking, and it doesn't get on the show or doesn't make the airwaves. But
by the way, they did some sort of power ranking segment on Saturday with 3D and Griff, and they both put the Warriors at the top of their power rankings and sort of chuckled at me having the Raptors at number one, without the context that my rankings had come out 5 days earlier, and I'm just gonna throw that out there that if they're gonna do that again, they need to say, hey, we're taking this with 5 additional days of data to look at.
Don't worry, I will make sure to bring that up to 3D as well. Feel free to tweet at he and Griff and give them the business, if you don't mind. Again, we'll see you here Thursday, and we'll have plenty more topics to discuss about the league and everything that goes on around the NBA. We'll see you right here next time on the Hang Time Podcast.